You ever have one of those moments that feels so ordinary, so painfully normal, that you don't realize it's the start of everything changing? For me, it was a Tuesday. The kind that smelled like burnt coffee and recycled ambition. My name's Evelyn Ross, and back then I thought I understood the world. Or at least the world of work. I believed that if you showed up early, stayed late, and said yes even when you were tired, you'd earn respect. Maybe even a promotion. I believed loyalty meant something. Turns out it does, just not to the people I gave it to. The office of Harrington and Blythe Consulting looked like success. Frosted glass walls, chrome fixtures, everything minimalist and sterile. Like it had been designed by someone who wanted to pretend emotions didn't exist. I used to love the sound the elevator made when it opened onto the 17th floor. That little chime felt like the sound of progress. Every morning I'd clutch my coffee like armor, nod to the receptionist and walk straight into battle. And my general, my mentor, my boss was Richard Blythe. He had that kind of presence that filled a room. Tall, confident, with the kind of smile that made you think he knew exactly what you wanted to hear. For a long time I thought he was brilliant. He had the sharpest instincts I'd ever seen. The way he could turn a meeting around with 2 sentences. It was intoxicating to watch. When I first started, he told me, "Evelyn, you've got fire. Don't let anyone put it out." And I believed him. God, I believed him. For the first few years I poured myself into that job like it was my life's purpose. I was the one who stayed until midnight fixing client decks. The one who caught mistakes before they went out. The one who made Richard look good, and didn't mind that nobody knew it was me. He'd pat my shoulder during board meetings and say, "Couldn't have done it without Evelyn," and my stomach would flutter with pride. Recognition, even crumbs of it, felt like validation. But behind those smiles I didn't see what was growing, that quiet imbalance. The way every success was his victory, but every mistake was our responsibility. And I was too eager, too naive to question it. I remember the first time my mom got sick. It was the end of April. She called me one morning while I was already late for a quarterly review meeting. Her voice was soft, trembling, like she didn't want to worry me. She said, "It's just some fatigue, honey. The doctor wants to run a few tests." I brushed it off. I told her to rest, promised I'd come by the weekend. Then I slipped my phone into my bag and ran into the conference room, heart pounding, apologizing for being 2 minutes late. Richard didn't even look up from his laptop. 2 minutes, he said without lifting his eyes. That's how long a client decides whether they trust us. It stung, but I told myself it was fair. Standards were standards. That's how I justified the imbalance for years. I told myself he's hard on me because he believes in me. When the diagnosis came, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I was sitting in my office with a stack of reports on my desk and the soft hum of the copier down the hall. I remember the exact shade of light in that moment. A grayish glow through the window blinds, the kind that makes everything look like a memory. My mother's voice cracked over the phone when she said the word, "terminal." And for a second everything went still. The hum of the copier, the clicking keyboards, all of it faded. The only sound I could hear was my own breathing. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at my computer screen, reading the same sentence over and over, until the letters stopped making sense. When I told Richard I was nervous. I remember twisting my hands together in his office, my throat dry. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. "Take whatever time you need," he said. That was the first thing he said. Then he added, "But make sure the Peterson account doesn't fall through. They're expecting a proposal next week." And that's when I realized his sympathy had a deadline. So I worked. From the hospital. From my car. From my mother's bedside, while the beeping machines punctuated every thought. I told myself it was temporary, that if I could just hold things together, if I could just be indispensable, it would all be worth it. I didn't realize I was measuring my worth by how much I could endure. There was one night I'll never forget. The hospital was quiet except for the distant hum of air vents. I was sitting beside my mom's bed, laptop open, finishing a report. Her hand was resting near mine, frail and pale, and she whispered, "You work too hard, sweetheart." I smiled, pretending not to hear the fear behind her words. "I just want to make you proud," I said. She gave me that weak little laugh that always made me feel like a child again. "You already did." That night I sent the proposal. And the next morning Richard emailed me. "Good work. Got the Peterson deal. Keep it up." "No thank you." "No, how's your mom?" "Just keep it up." When she passed, 3 weeks later, I didn't even get to be there. I was in the office, giving a presentation Richard was too busy to attend. The call came in halfway through. I silenced it. I finished the slides. By the time I made it to the hospital, she was gone. The last thing my mother ever said to me was, "Don't stay too late at work." And I did. I tried to go back to normal. I really did. But something inside me was hollow. The kind of hollow that echoes. I'd sit at my desk surrounded by people talking about client pitches and quarterly targets, and I'd think, does any of this matter? I started slipping. My reports weren't perfect. I forgot to reply to a few emails. I even missed a meeting once. The first time in 7 years. Richard noticed. He started calling me into his office for performance discussions. His tone was always calm, almost friendly, but there was that edge underneath. "Are you sure you're ready to be back?" he'd say. "We need you at 100%, Evelyn. Clients depend on you." "I depend on you." It was guilt disguised as concern. Manipulation wrapped in mentorship. One Friday he called me in again. The blinds were half drawn, his desk perfectly organized, except for a single sheet of paper placed neatly in front of him. I knew before he said it. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he said, not looking sorry at all. "We have to let you go." I stared at him. For what? For performance. For disengagement. For... He hesitated, like he was picking the least offensive word. Burnout. I remember laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. "I worked through my mother's death," I said. "You know that, right? I gave you everything." He folded his hands. "And I appreciate it. But this is business, not charity." And just like that, I was out. No severance. No recommendations. Just a box of my belongings and a final HR signature. As I packed my things, I looked around that sterile office, the same one I had poured my life into, and realized something brutal. I had built my identity around people who didn't even see me. The elevator chime that used to sound like progress now felt like a death knell. That night, I went home to an apartment that still smelled faintly like my mother's lavender lotion. I sat on the floor with that stupid box of office junk. My nameplate, a cracked mug, a few faded sticky notes. And for the first time in years I cried. Not pretty crying. The kind that comes in waves. The kind that leaves you gasping. I didn't know who I was without that job. Without that purpose. All I knew was loss. Of a mother, a career, and a self I'd spent years building. And somewhere beneath all that grief, a quiet realization began to form. If I had been loyal enough to lose everything, then maybe it was time to learn how to be loyal to myself. That thought, fragile as it was, became the spark. The beginning of something I didn't yet have a name for. You think the worst part of losing everything will be the day it happens. But it's not. It's the days after, the mornings that come like clockwork even when you wish they wouldn't. The first Monday after I was fired, I woke up at 6:30 out of habit. My body still thought it had somewhere to be. I even ironed my blouse before I remembered. It was like my mind hadn't caught up to the reality my body already knew, that there was nowhere to go. No meeting to prepare for. No emails waiting for me. Just silence. The walls of my apartment were thin. I could hear my neighbor's coffee grinder through the drywall, the sound of someone else starting their day. Meanwhile, I sat there staring at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. The same one I'd carried to every meeting, every deadline, every sleepless night. It was strange how something could hold so many memories and still look indifferent. The cursor blinked on an empty document like it was mocking me. No new emails. For the first week I did nothing. I told people I was taking time to heal, but what I really did was sit on the couch and replay every decision I'd ever made. Every yes I'd said when I wanted to say no. Every weekend I'd traded for another person's ambition. I started measuring my days by small, stupid things. How long it took me to finish a cup of coffee, how many times I refreshed job boards even though I wasn't ready to apply. The world kept spinning and I didn't. Grief is funny like that. It doesn't just show up when you lose someone. It sneaks in when you lose yourself. About 3 weeks in, I finally went through the box I'd brought home from the office. It sat by the door like a ghost I couldn't make eye contact with. Inside were fragments of a life that no longer existed. A few thank you notes from coworkers, an old lanyard, and a small photo of my mom I kept taped to my monitor. She was smiling in it, holding a cup of tea in the backyard of our old house. I remember sitting there on the floor, tracing her smile with my thumb and whispering, "I don't know what to do, Mom." The room was quiet. only the sound of traffic outside. Then almost instinctively I opened her old journal, the one she'd kept in her nightstand. I hadn't read it since she died. The pages smelled faintly of lilac. There was a line she'd written years ago, when she was fighting to keep our family home after my father left. When everything feels like it's falling apart, maybe it's just falling into place for something new. I laughed when I read it. It sounded like the kind of thing people post on Instagram. But still, it stayed with me. That night I wrote in my own notebook for the first time in years. Not work notes, not bullet points, just thoughts. Frustrations. Memories. I wrote about Richard. His fake smiles, his calculated warmth, the way he'd looked at me like I was a resource, not a person. I wrote until my hand cramped. And when I finally put the pen down, I felt lighter. Not better. Just less heavy. The next month was brutal. My savings dwindled faster than I expected. Rent, groceries, health insurance. The world doesn't stop billing you just because you're broken. I started applying for jobs again, but every rejection felt personal. I'd open those polite emails, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates," and feel that same burn in my stomach. Like I was being told over and over that I wasn't enough. Some nights I'd lie awake replaying my mother's last days, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Maybe somehow I deserved to lose it all. Because that's what grief does. It makes you bargain with ghosts. One afternoon I met up with Lena, an old colleague from the firm. He was still there, still surviving the grind. We met at a cafe near the office, the same one we used to escape to for 5-minute sanity breaks. When she walked in, she looked polished, confident, but there was a tiredness behind her eyes that I recognized. She hugged me like she wasn't sure if she should. "How've you been holding up?" I gave the standard lie. "Better every day." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know they replaced you, right? 2 weeks after you left." I nodded. "Figures." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "And, Richard's been bragging. About the Peterson deal. Telling people it was his all along." That one stung. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it confirmed what I'd always known deep down. I wasn't just replaceable. I was erased. I left the cafe early. Walked past the glass tower of Harrington and Blythe, that gleaming monument to other people's egos, and saw my own reflection in the lobby window. I looked like a stranger. Hollow-eyed. But there was something else there too, something small and defiant. It wasn't anger, not yet. Just the faint outline of it. The turning point came quietly. I was scrolling through job listings one morning when I saw a post for a small startup downtown. A data analytics firm looking for consultants. It wasn't glamorous and it definitely wasn't stable, but the founder's note at the bottom caught my eye. It said, "We're not looking for perfect. We're looking for people who've fallen and gotten back up." Something about that line hit me like a pulse. I interviewed 2 days later. The office was nothing like the one I'd come from. Cramped, messy, half the chairs didn't match. But the energy, it was real. People were laughing, talking, building something. The founder, Marcus Lee, asked me questions that no one at Harrington and Blythe ever had. "What do you want your life to feel like?" he asked. Not "what do you want your career to look like?" Not "where do you see yourself in 5 years?" But "feel like." And for the first time I didn't answer automatically. I actually thought about it. "I want to wake up and not dread my own potential," I said. He smiled. "Then let's start there." He hired me on the spot. Working for that startup felt like rehab for my soul. There were no corner offices, no titles that inflated egos, no politics, just work that mattered. Marcus treated people like humans, not assets. And in that environment I started to breathe again. I made mistakes, lots of them. I overcorrected, over-apologized, over-explained, habits born from years of walking on eggshells. But slowly I started unlearning the fear that had been drilled into me. There was one night, maybe 6 months in, when Marcus and I were the last ones in the office. We were reviewing projections for a new client pitch and I caught myself waiting for his disapproval, that sharp criticism I'd grown used to. Instead he looked at me and said, "You know, you've got really good instincts. You should trust them more." It was such a simple sentence. But it was like someone cracked open a window in a room I didn't know was suffocating me. That night, walking home under the streetlights, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was changing. Time passed. The company grew. I started leading small teams, mentoring newer hires, taking ownership in ways I'd never been allowed to before. My ideas were being heard, not stolen, not filtered through someone else's mouth. And as we grew, I started to see something familiar in the work we were doing. The data consulting we specialized in, the systems analysis, the strategic planning. It was the same kind of work Harrington and Blythe had built their empire on. Only this time it wasn't soulless. We were using analytics to help nonprofits, small businesses, even hospitals. Felt like redemption. But I still carried Richard's voice in my head sometimes, that cold, dismissive tone. You're not indispensable, Evelyn. It echoed in the quiet moments. So I worked harder, built faster. Not to prove him wrong, but to prove I could exist without his shadow. 2 years later, Marcus called me into his office. There was excitement in his voice I hadn't heard before. He said, "We're expanding. Investors want in. We need someone to run the East Coast operations." I blinked. "You mean me?" He grinned. "Who else? You built half of this with me." That's when I learned the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss takes credit. A leader shares the crown. I became a partner that year. It didn't feel like revenge, not yet. It felt like arrival. Like I'd stepped into a version of myself my mother would have recognized. But life has a funny way of looping back. Because a year after that, the same year we started acquiring smaller firms to grow our reach, a familiar name came across my desk. Harrington and Blythe Consulting. Their stock had plummeted after a string of PR scandals. Mismanagement, client fraud, executive misconduct. The kind of poetic collapse that sounds scripted, but wasn't. They were bleeding money, desperate for a buyout. Marcus looked at me across the table during that strategy meeting and said, "You used to work there, right?" I nodded. Fully. He raised an eyebrow. "You want to handle this one?" And I said without hesitation, "Yeah. I do." There's a strange kind of silence that comes with victory. Not the cheering kind. Not the cinematic kind with fireworks or applause. It's quieter than that, steady, deliberate. Like the sound of your own heartbeat when you realize you've made it to the other side of something that almost destroyed you. That was the sound I heard the morning I walked into the boardroom of Blythe Consulting, the company that once chewed me up and spat me out. 3 years had passed since I was fired. 3 years since I'd stood in that same lobby holding a cardboard box, my world in fragments. And now there I was, standing under the same chandelier, wearing the kind of confidence that doesn't come from titles or money, but from having lost everything and rebuilt yourself from the ground up. The receptionist didn't recognize me. Why would she? But I recognized her, the polite half-smile, the practiced indifference. The corporate mask. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I replied. "I'm here for the acquisition meeting." The word acquisition felt electric on my tongue. When the elevator doors opened, that familiar chime echoed through me like a memory, the sound that once felt like progress, then failure, and now, closure. The boardroom looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because, for the first time, I wasn't the one sitting at the edge of the table trying to make myself smaller. I was at the head of it. Marcus was there along with our legal team. The partners from Blythe Consulting filed in slowly. Pale faces, stiff suits, the exhaustion of people who'd been pretending everything was fine for far too long. And then Richard walked in. He looked older. Thinner. His once perfect posture now slightly slouched, his confidence worn down by years of corporate decay. But the moment he saw me, I watched something flicker behind his eyes. Disbelief, then discomfort, then a thin, forced smile. "Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth but shaky. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," I almost said. But instead I smiled. "It has." He gestured toward the documents spread across the table. "So, you're with the firm that's buying us out." "I am," I said. "Actually, I'm overseeing the acquisition." That sentence hung in the air like a slow clap. The meeting began. Numbers, valuations, restructuring, the language of business, cold and impersonal. But beneath the jargon I could feel the undercurrent. Fear. Richard was trying to hold on to control the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. He interrupted, deflected, postured. He spoke to Marcus but never looked directly at me for too long, like I was a mirror he couldn't stand to face. At one point he said, "This company has a legacy worth preserving." And I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not loud. Just enough for everyone to hear the truth underneath. "A legacy?" I said softly. "Is that what you call it?" He blinked. "Excuse me." I leaned forward. When you fired people for caring about their families. When you took credit for their work. When you built a culture of fear and called it excellence, that's your legacy. The room went quiet. Even Marcus looked up from his notes. Richard tried to recover. Business is business, Evelyn. You of all people should understand that. I do, I said. But business isn't cruelty. It's not exploitation. And it's not using loyalty as leverage. He didn't respond. Just stared at the papers in front of him, jaw tight. That was the thing about men like Richard. They were never prepared for consequences that didn't come from the outside. The ones that came from people they underestimated, those hit hardest. After the meeting we took a break. I stood by the window looking out over the city skyline. The same skyline I used to dream about from my cubicle, wondering if I'd ever matter in a world this big. Richard approached me quietly. For a moment he dropped the charm. Why are you doing this? He asked. I turned to him. Doing what? Buying this place. You could have left it to die. Why not just let it collapse? I studied him for a long moment. Because I didn't want revenge. I wanted to rebuild what people like you broke. He scoffed. You always were sentimental. I smiled faintly. No. I just believe people deserve better than the kind of leadership you gave them. He started to say something, then stopped. The words wouldn't come. Maybe because he knew they wouldn't matter. The acquisition went through 2 weeks later. Blythe Consulting was officially absorbed into our firm. Overnight, the company that once discarded me became part of the one I helped build. I didn't throw a party. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat. But I did go back one last time, to my old office. It was empty now. Just a shell. The desk was bare, the air thick with dust. But when I looked at the faint outline on the wall where my nameplate used to hang, I smiled. Because that woman, the one who sat here once, she didn't know she'd survive. She didn't know she'd rise higher than the people who broke her. I closed the door behind me. And with that I let it go. That should have been the end of it. But life, as always, had one more scene to write. About a month after the merger, Richard requested a meeting. He wasn't so anymore. We'd retained him temporarily as a consultant to smooth the transition. When he walked into my new office, I could see the exhaustion written all over him. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that looked a lot like humility, or maybe just defeat. He sat down across from me, silent for a long moment. Then he said, I didn't think you'd make it. Most people didn't, I said. He nodded slowly. You were good, Evelyn. One of the best. I was hard on you because I wanted to push you. I tilted my head. No, you were hard on me because control made you feel powerful. He flinched just barely. Maybe. But you're the one sitting behind that desk now. So, I guess it worked. I smiled, but it wasn't unkind. No, Richard. It worked despite you. For a moment we just sat there. Two people who had once shared ambition, now divided by everything it cost. When he left, he paused by the door. For what it's worth, he said, you built something real. And for the first time in all the years I'd known him, I believed he meant it. That night, after the office emptied out, I sat by the window with a glass of wine, watching the city lights flicker like stars scattered across concrete. I thought about my mother, about how she used to say, grace isn't weakness, Evelyn. It's strength under control. And I realized, that's what this moment was. Not vengeance. Not payback. Just grace. Because true revenge isn't about making them suffer. It's about living in a way that proves they never had the power to define you. The company flourished in the years that followed. We rebuilt Blythe Consulting from the inside out. New ethics, new culture, new purpose. We called it Ross and Lee Consulting. Marcus insisted my name come first, though I argued endlessly. He said, you earned this. Let the world see it. I hired people who'd been overlooked, silenced, underestimated. People like I used to be. We built an environment where no one had to apologize for having a life outside their job. Where compassion and competence coexisted. And the funny thing? Our profits doubled. Turns out humanity is good for business. Sometimes investors would ask about the company's history. Why the merger with Blythe, they'd say. And I'd smile and answer, because some roots need new soil to grow. I ran into Richard one last time, purely by chance at a leadership conference in Chicago. He was sitting alone at a table reading a program pamphlet. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. Evelyn Ross, he said almost to himself. I see your name everywhere these days. I smiled. Good to see you, Richard. He hesitated. You know, I used to think power was about control. Now I think it's about legacy. And what's yours? I asked. He looked down, then said quietly, learning the hard way that I had it wrong. I left him there, not out of pride but peace. Because the truth was I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't need to. He was a chapter. I was the book. When I tell people this story now, standing on stages, mentoring young women, sharing lessons about resilience and leadership, they always ask, how did you forgive him? And I tell them I didn't do it for him. I did it for the woman I used to be. The one who thought she had to earn kindness. The one who mistook exploitation for opportunity. The one who silenced her needs to make someone else feel powerful. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing him. It was about freeing myself from the weight of his shadow. Every time I walk past our office now, sleek, modern, filled with laughter and life, I think about that young version of me, the one sitting in a sterile glass box begging to be seen. And I whisper to her, you made it. You're safe now. Because success without peace is just another kind of prison. But success with purpose? That's freedom. And that's what I found, not because my boss fired me, but because when he did, he unknowingly handed me the keys to my own becoming.